The topic that we're discussing this week is the life cycle of teams. Here is a list of all the topics we're going to be covering in the presentation.
The theory of the life cycle of teams was first introduced by Bruce Tuckman in 1965. Tuckman was an educational psychologist and researcher whose research came mainly from a psychotherapy and mental health context, which helps us to understand the lens he was looking through. He was interested in exploring group dynamics and how people's personalities influenced group functioning. When he created this model, it was based on two areas of group development, which were interpersonal relationships and task activity. This model served to provide a common language to understand and explore team dynamics. The stages were forming, storming, norming, performing, and later adjourning or leaving, which I'll dive deeper into on the next slide. Members have to handle each stage successfully in order to achieve effective team functioning. There were a few limitations following Tuckman's first lit review about the model in that it did not provide an accurate representation of small group development across many settings. It overrepresented therapy group settings. This led to an implication for shift in focus from looking at conflict as a stage to exploring the concerns that drive the conflict to make it more generalized. Another limitation was that there was a lack of conclusions about specific effects of independent variables on group development, which later encouraged further research along those lines. Lastly, there were many questions regarding how to get past each stage, raising questions like what if the storming stage never ends, and what is needed in each stage to exceed performance norms? In later slides, we'll discuss what is needed to get past each stage based on problems and solutions. The team life cycle is defined as different stages of evolution during which members exhibit different patterns of behavior and productivity. There are 5 common stages of the cycle, but in some articles we found had 6. Like many development processes, this life cycle doesn't necessarily have to go from stage to stage in a linear sequence, as it can get very complex and jump around to different stages throughout the team's lifetime. Like briefly mentioned, forming is the first stage and is characterized by the term testing and dependence, meaning the group gets to know each other and the layout of the task, and begins to test their behavioral boundaries after expectations are established. Storming then comes, which is the first stage of conflict, where problems rise to the surface and members feel hostility towards each other due to their varying viewpoints on an issue. They resist unity and the overall group structure, and for some groups whose goals are formed around self-understanding, hostility can come with emotional responses. The next stage is norming, where the group settles their differences and develops shared mental models. More set roles and norms are established in hopes for the group to understand their values and work to avoid future conflict. Next is the performing stage, where the group develops functional role relatedness, where roles are more flexible but there is still a solid structure from the group's abilities to adapt well and overcome conflict in an efficient way. The last stage, adjourning, is pretty self-explanatory and was part of the revised version in 1977. That suggested the conclusion of a team is important for the life of a group. If there is any confusion, I included a visual of the stages explained through scenes in Lord of the Rings, which will help to simplify their meanings.
Okay, so how stages affect team effectiveness? In stage 1, the effectiveness could be considered at a middle level, as teams tend to have an abundance of potential, but at the same time, a lot of uncertainty as well. Teams are in a state of excitement, anxiety, and insecurity at this time. Roles and goals are unclear at this stage. However, team members are motivated, and communication within the team is tentative and polite at this time. Stage 2 tends to decrease effectiveness temporarily. Communication becomes more tense and members begin to question or disagree on team goals. It may seem as though the group has regressed, but in fact, these changes are essential for team development. The team is going through a clarification phase at this time. Stage 3 begins a large increase of effectiveness, united by a clear and common purpose and goals. Members feel a shared sense of belonging and increasing levels of trust and interdependence. This allows for more team collaboration and therefore more effective teams. Stage 4 includes mutual trust and respect, as well as shared processes, methods, tools, and sets of norms. It enables high levels of effectiveness and efficiency. Team members feel more confident and fulfilled, which allows for consistent engagement and exploration. Over time, stage 5 begins, which is when a team's energized engagement gives way to boredom, fatigue, and stagnation. This is a natural part of any team's life cycle, and member disengagement results in a decrease in the team's effectiveness. And then in the article that I read, they also mentioned a 6th stage, and because of the decrease in effectiveness in stage 5, the 6th stage is when a team reflects on whether the next step should be a rebirth and begin the life cycle over again, or if termination or death of the team is a more appropriate next step.
The purpose of this study was to investigate the consequences of professional diversity on team dynamics. It was found that more than 70% of medical errors are due to dysfunctional team dynamics, which is why the life cycle or development of a team is so important. This study explored the relationship between professional diversity and 3 elements of team dynamics, including effective conflict, elaborative behavior, and interprofessional openness. Survey data from 47 interprofessional teams in an acute care setting was used to investigate 2 mediation pathways. The hypothesis for this study was that interprofessional composition impacts team dynamics by increasing the likelihood of effective conflict, which mediates a decrease in elaborative behaviors and open-mindedness. This hypothesis was investigated using a cross-sectional correlational design. Effective conflict is conflict that creates negative effect and is represented by hostility and friction. Elaborative behavior is the exchange, discussion, and debate of ideas, and interprofessional openness is the extent to which team members are eager to use the knowledge and skills of other professions to complete the team's task. And here are the findings from the study. A moderated relationship between professional diversity and effective conflict, which is conflict that creates negative effects, exists when team members strongly identify with their profession. Teams composed of different professions are likely to engage in effective conflict only when members identify strongly with their profession. Next, team elaborative behaviors, which is the discussion of ideas, are critical mechanisms through which team diversity influences innovation and effectiveness. Also, cognitive factors have been linked to idea generation and performance in complex team tasks. However, the study conveys that professional diversity in terms of conflict has the possibility of reducing openness because members may not feel comfortable sharing due to the fear that other professions may disagree or not respect their viewpoint. So this can lead to poor team performance. Lastly, negative performance in interprofessional teams may stem from limited engagement by members in open-minded and elaborative behavior following conflict. So the takeaway according to this study is that there needs to be leadership and team development interventions that target the promotion of open discussion and debate. And what I took away from the study, we know that diversity of professions and viewpoints can lead to higher quality outcomes, but I wanted to take a different route by using this article to look at how this diversity can cause conflict if team members do not respect one another and are not trained and educated properly on how to participate in interprofessional collaboration. This conflict that can be created by team diversity can greatly impact the life cycle of a team. I'm applying this increased potential of conflict created by diversity to phases and problems/solutions explained in the class reading by Drinka and Clark. With professional diversity increasing the possibility of conflict, a team may often experience these phases. In the forming phase, the conflict caused by professional diversity, especially if proper training and education is not provided, will commonly be repressed and the team will transition to the norming phase. In the norming phase, additional conflict often occurs because it was dismissed in the forming phase without a solution. It continues to be dismissed without a solution in the norming phase as well. Equality of leadership is attempted. Frustration builds, members turn to their discipline-specific ways of operating, and the team may remain stagnant in this phase. Competition between disciplines may occur. Conflict becomes too difficult not to address, and the team then moves to the confronting phase. In the confronting phase, conflict is addressed. Constructive confrontation and problem-solving behavior occurs. Members realize that power cannot be equal, and informal leadership roles by each member is assumed. The team then moves into the performing phase. However, if conflict is not addressed in the confronting phase, the team reverts back to the normal phase, where conflict is often pushed under the rug. In the performing phase, members demonstrate power in the process of collaboration. A right to individual power is established, and this allows for every member to have power for decision-making. Constructive confrontation becomes normal. Initial goals should be re-examined. However, re-examining goals may lead to poor elaborative behavior, which is from the professional diversity article that I discussed, and inevitable conflict occurs, but if the team is mature, they can confront this conflict in a constructive way, such as in the confronting phase. Lastly, there is the leaving phase. The leaving phase is not always included in models, but according to the class reading by Drinka and Clark, members may leave the team especially if solutions to conflict are not implemented, leading to the leaving phase. This can cause an increase in conflict as new members enter the team and other members choose different methods to cope with the loss of a prior member.
Conflict is a natural part of being on a team and can occur at any time, whether it be the creation, maintenance, or disbandment of a team. This particular study brings up 3 different types of conflict that you might come across. Task conflict deals with issues with ideas, perspectives, actions, and plans that have to do with the work that's being done. Relationship conflict deals with the interpersonal issues involving tensions, friction, resentment, grudges. And then process conflict deals with the differing views about the work processes, like assigning or distributing a workload and prioritization of tasks. So we will likely be exposed to each of these at some point when on a healthcare team in the future. Therapists might butt heads about long-term goals for a client to ensure a safe discharge. There may be a fellow coworker that has significant different views on effective treatment, and that could cause some tension. And maybe we'll have a manager or director that doesn't prioritize their tasks and leaves their workers in the dark about scheduling time off, etc. Just like both things in life, there are beneficial and harmful consequences of conflict. This study explored the relationships between conflict and different critical characteristics of a team. In terms of potency or effectiveness of a team, further research would need to be done for increased accuracy, but in general, task and relationship conflicts decrease team members' perception of the team's ability to perform well. This was then projected to the team's potency and performance. In terms of team behaviors, task and relationship conflicts generally diminished a team's cooperation while improving competition. For avoidance behaviors between team members, increased relationship conflict naturally increases avoidance while task conflict decreased it. And for innovation, no significant correlation was found between any type of conflict and the innovation of a team, despite the finding that mild to moderate task conflict appeared to improve team decision-making and where significant task conflict harmed it. And then lastly, for team performance, the team's performance was not significantly impacted by task or relationship conflict, but increases in process conflict can greatly decrease the performance of a team. And so, while a lot of these relationships are logical, it's nice to see it laid out like this for reflection. And within a healthcare team, I would think that conflict negatively affecting team behaviors would be the most detrimental, as interpersonal issues within a team could potentially have more direct effects on the clients being treated. And now a fieldwork example. So over the summer, I was working at a skilled nursing facility where I was my supervisor's first fieldwork student, And our director of rehab, who was a NAS alum, also had his first fieldwork student from Ithaca. And during this time, there was definitely a bit of an increase in competition behavior on the team. Some of this was due to conflict in tasks. So sometimes the effectiveness of our treatments would be in question. So one of the supervisors would point out, oh, this other fieldwork student is using this protocol. What is your student doing? And just a constant sort of back and forth like that would create more competition. And then as well as in relationship conflicts, I suppose, the director kind of placed higher expectations on me for being from NAS and expected better treatment and general performance because of that, which was a bit unfortunate. But so that's one example of how a change in conflict within a team can change the team's behaviors in a negative way.
Another fieldwork experience that can connect to this topic in a more positive light is at my placement at Mary Cariola, there were many consistent team meetings where interprofessional collaboration took place. Professionals from all different domains, including special ed, OT, PT, social work, and so on, met to discuss each student receiving services in order to work as a more holistic and effective team. Constructive confrontation is a key aspect of the performing stage of a team's life cycle, and these meetings were held in order to sustain performance levels of the team and maintain that high level of efficiency.
The first link listed provides a short explanation of the developmental phases of interprofessional healthcare teams. The second link goes into detail about the storming phase. So here's a couple resources that you can look at for extra information.
All right, so these are the discussion questions for you guys to respond to in the forum, and then these are our references.